The first sound was not the hammer but the silence before it, thick as wet cloth pressing into the lungs waiting to be torn. Then came the strike, iron against iron, a ringing that split the dark like a wound. Each spark spat into the night did not fall. It hovered, it writhed, it flared like fireflies dragged from the underworld, alive for an instant before shriveling into black dust. The forge glowed in the hollow of the cabin, a red wound stitched into the Virginia night. Shadows bent around it like supplicants, kneeling, swaying, whispering. The smell of burnt coal clung to everything, the walls, the skin, the lungs, in a scent both earthly and infernal, as though hell itself had opened its throat to breathe through Gabriel's fire. Gabriel Prosser's arms moved with a rhythm older than chains, older than bondage, and a rhythm of creation, of reshaping. Sweat traced down his neck, but his eyes burned with something colder, sharper. In every swing, he struck not only steel but the memory of lashes, the weight of iron collars, the echo of moans buried in the fields. Clang. The world answered back. Clang. The world trembled. Clang. The night itself seemed to listen, and then came the whisper. It was not born of lips but of metal, from the seam where hammer kissed iron. It slithered into the air, faint at first, then rising like steam. Break the yoke. Gabriel froze. The hammer mid-air. The room quivered, as though the walls themselves waited for his reply. A voice, low and hushed, bled from the corner where shadows gathered thickest. "You hear it too, brother?" One of the men, his face carved by years of toil, leaned closer to the fire's glow. His eyes gleamed like wet stones. Gabriel lowered the hammer, the iron still sizzling upon the anvil. His voice was rough, a whisper within whispers. "I hear," the steel sings. Another voice, this one a younger man, cracked like brittle wood. "It sings of blood. Do you not smell it?" And indeed, beneath coal and sweat there rose a faint copper tang, sharp, undeniable. Blood, though no blade had cut, though no flesh had torn. The smell slithered into their nostrils, binding them with dread and hunger alike. The men stood silent, listening. Outside, the cicadas fell quiet, as though the land itself leaned closer to hear the forging. The James River groaned in the distance, its waters swollen, restless. Gabriel raised the hammer again, striking once more. Sparks burst forth, a scatter of embers that twisted into forms, faces screaming, eyes burning, chains snapping. The air above the anvil became a mirror of torment, a prophecy scrawled in fire and smoke. The whispers grew louder. No longer one voice, but many, overlapping, chanting, beckoning, "Rise, rise, rise." The younger man stumbled back, crossing himself, though no priest had ever taught him the prayer. "It is cursed," he hissed. "The fire speaks damnation." But Gabriel's jaw clenched like iron itself. He leaned into the glow, his reflection in the steel warped, monstrous, holy. "No, it speaks truth." The hammer fell again, and again. Each strike birthed another vision. Fields burning, gallows splintering, a city trembling beneath barefoot feet. Shadows pressed against the windows as though dozens stood outside watching, waiting, though no figure could be seen. At the fourth strike, the forge flared so violently the roof beams shuddered. A spark leapt farther than the rest, landing upon the dirt floor. Yet instead of dying, it crawled. Yes, crawled. Like a living ember, trailing smoke as it writhed toward Gabriel's boots. He stamped it out, but the mark remained, a blackened scar upon the earth shaped like a noose. The men shuddered. One whispered, "Omen." Gabriel did not answer. His silence was heavier than words, heavier than chains. His chest rose and fell, his breath slow, deliberate, as though he had heard what none of them dared to speak. The anvil rang again. But this time the sound did not fade into the night. It lingered, a bell tolling in the marrow of the land. Dogs barked far off. A baby cried. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain, of storm. And somewhere in Richmond, though no man could prove it, the armory doors groaned upon their hinges, as if stirred by the echo of Gabriel's hammer. The forge's fire guttered low, then surged high, licking the beams with greedy tongues of flame. Within its light the shadows of the men lengthened, towering, monstrous, as though their very souls had grown fangs and claws. The older man fell to his knees, whispering a prayer too soft to name. The younger covered his eyes. But Gabriel did not flinch. He stared into the fire as though it were a mirror of his own heart, fast, furious, unchained. And then came the last whisper. low and certain, curling through the room like smoke into lungs. Blood will be the forge. Freedom will be the blade. The hammer slipped from Gabriel's hand, striking the floor with a dull, final thud. The fire dimmed at once as if appeased, but outside thunder cracked across the Virginia sky. The storm had begun, and in the brief flare of lightning the cabin window reflected not 3 men but 30, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, their mouths wide as if screaming without sound. The night bent low over the field, smothering the earth in a silence so heavy it seemed to press upon the ribs. Through the stalks of tobacco, tall and brittle as bone, figures moved without sound. Men, yet not men. Wraiths cloaked in rags and sweat, their bodies scarred, their eyes burning with the quiet fire of something too long buried. Each step was measured, careful, as if the soil itself might cry out against them. The moon hung swollen, a pale, lidless eye that watched and judged. Its light silvered their faces, hollowing cheeks, sharpening shadows, making them appear more spectre than flesh. And yet they carried no chains this night. Their hands bore only the weight of oaths. Promises passed like smuggled fire from mouth to mouth, sealed in breath and spit. In silence, one whispered, "Brother Gabriel has called." Another answered, low, barely audible, "And we come." The tobacco rustled faintly as though it too leaned in to hear. The leaves, waxy and sickly, quivered in the night wind like parchment waiting for ink. They gathered in the hollow behind the old smokehouse, a ruin of splintered beams. Its roof collapsed, its stones blackened as if struck by lightning. No white eyes lingered there anymore, for it was said the place was haunted by the groans of those once chained within. The men formed a circle, their breaths clouding faint in the cooling air. Though the night was thick and heavy, from the dark stepped Gabriel. His presence was not loud, yet it was absolute, like iron sinking into water. The forge still clung to him, the smell of coal, the sheen of sweat, the glint of something otherworldly that marked him as more than blacksmith, more than man. His voice when it came was low, but it carried through them as though the ground itself had spoken. "The fire has spoken," he said. "It promises blood. It promises freedom." A murmur rippled the circle. Some lowered their heads, some clenched their fists. One man, older than the rest, his beard white as ash, whispered, "And what price will the fire demand?" Gabriel's gaze was steady, reflecting the moon like cold iron. "All freedom is bought. The anvil tells me, and the price is flesh, the coin is blood." A shudder passed through them. The youngest among them, barely grown, swallowed hard, eyes darting as though shadows themselves might rise to bind him. "But," Gabriel continued, "the chains are weaker than they seem. Tonight we forge ourselves into a blade. Tomorrow, that blade shall cut." The words clung to the night like smoke. Then, as if to seal the vow, a strange wind stirred the circle. It carried with it not the sweet, damp smell of earth, but something acrid, sharp, the copper tang of blood. The men stiffened. The youngest covered his nose, whispering, "Do you smell it?" As if the dead walk among us. From the darkness beyond the ruined beams came a sound, faint, dragging, like feet across dry leaves. All eyes turned, hearts pounding, hands tightening around nothing but air, but nothing emerged. Only the wind sighing through broken wood. Gabriel raised his hand steady, unshaken. "Do not fear shadows. We are shadows." His words settled over them like a cloak, though unease lingered. One by one the men stepped forward, each placing a hand upon the scorched stone at the ruin's center. Their palms pressed to it as though the stone itself were altar and witness, and as they touched it their lips murmured oaths, not loud, not in unison but overlapping, a chorus of broken voices swearing vengeance, swearing freedom, swearing blood. And as they spoke, the night seemed to bend. The tobacco fields beyond shifted with a sound too heavy for mere leaves. The wind carried a sigh that was almost a moan. The circle's shadows stretched unnaturally long, twisting across the dirt, reaching toward one another until they touched, forming a vast, unbroken ring. The old man trembled, his hand lingering on the stone. "The dead hear us," he muttered. "The ground drinks our vow." "Then let the ground keep it," Gabriel replied, his voice hard as the forge. Silence fell again, thick as tar. Above them, the moon drifted behind a veil of cloud, leaving them in a darkness so pure it seemed bottomless. And in that darkness a sound stirred, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. The men froze. It was the sound of chains, not real ones, but spectral and dragging through the night, circling them. Tightening the ring, the young man whimpered. "They come." Gabriel's face, lit only by the faint ember of a torch stub, did not waver. His voice cut the dark like a blade. "No, they march with us." And then the sound ceased, as sudden as it had come. But when the moon broke free again, each man saw the same thing, prints in the dirt around their circle. Bare feet, many of them, pressed deep as if the earth itself remembered those who could not rise. The men drew breath as one, hearts hammering, the air thick with dread and awe. Gabriel closed his eyes, whispering a final vow. "The shadows are with us. The fire has spoken. The dead themselves gather." And as his words faded, a crow broke from the trees, its cry ragged and sharp, shattering the silence. The bird wheeled overhead once, twice, and then plunged into the dark, vanishing like smoke. The men turned, dispersing back into the fields, their steps soundless, their hearts carrying the weight of oaths sealed in shadow and blood. The ruin remained behind, empty. Yet the stone at its center steamed faintly, as if it still burned from unseen fire, and across its surface, for the first time in years, a crack appeared, a black line running jagged and deep, like the first fracture in an old chain. The storm came not with warning but with a roar, as if some vast throat in the heavens had torn open to pour its grief upon the earth. Rain lashed the fields, unrelenting, each drop a nail hammered into the night. The sky cracked with jagged veins of light, searing the tobacco rows in ghastly white before plunging them back into suffocating dark. Wind howled through the trees like a congregation of ghosts, bending their branches until they scraped the earth like skeletal fingers. And the roads became rivers. What once was dust and stone dissolved into black mire, swelling, sucking, swallowing the footprints of men who had dared to walk toward destiny. The crossroads, where four paths met beneath the drooping limbs of a dead oak, drowned beneath the flood. Its signpost leaned, groaning, letters smeared with rain until no man could tell north from south, freedom from ruin. Through the torrent moved figures, bent low, cloaks and rags plastered to their bodies. Their torches hissed and sputtered, flames strangled by the storm, casting no light save brief sickly glimmers. Each man staggered through the sucking mud, their breath swallowed by the roar of rain. Yet still they pressed forward as if the storm itself were a trial they had been promised to endure. Gabriel was among them. He strode as though the flood could not claim him, though water clawed at his ankles, though mud gripped like a grave. His eyes, dark and steady, cut through the curtain of rain. He raised his hand, signaling for the men to halt, their circle tightening around him at the crossroads. They stood there, dozens of them, shadows in the storm, their faces ghostly pale in the lightning's flash. Each man bore no chain now, but their silence was a chain in itself, binding them together, holding them in the storm's throat. A voice, hoarse and nearly drowned in rain, broke the circle. "Brother Gabriel, the roads are gone. The river has swallowed them whole." Another spat mud, teeth flashing white in the dark. "It is a curse. Heaven itself tries to drown us." The wind tore their words apart, yet the fear in them lingered like smoke. Gabriel's reply was steady, spoken against the storm as if he wrestled the sky itself. "No curse, no heaven. Only men who fear are rising." But even as he spoke, the storm seemed to mock him. Thunder cracked so violently the ground shook, and the oak at the crossroads groaned as though something unseen pulled at its roots. Its limbs bent low, slick with rain, their shapes twisted by the lightning into figures that writhed and reached. The youngest among them, the same boy who had whispered fears at the gathering, pointed with a trembling hand. "Look there, the tree. The tree bears watchers," and indeed for an instant it seemed true, for as the lightning burned across the sky, faces appeared in the oak's hollows, hollow-eyed, mouths gaping, pale against the black bark, faces that vanished the moment darkness returned, leaving only dripping branches swaying like nooses. A murmur rippled through the men. Some crossed themselves, some turned their eyes away. One man muttered low, "Perhaps the storm is a warning. Perhaps the fire lied." Gabriel turned, his face half carved in lightning, half swallowed in shadow. "The fire does not lie." His words cut, but they did not soothe. The men's fear was thick, clinging as the mud around their legs. Each heartbeat felt stolen, each breath borrowed. The rain deepened. Water coursed across the road, carrying sticks, stones, refuse. Among it something else drifted by, pale, thin, hand-shaped. One man cried out, stumbling back, for he swore it was an arm, severed yet moving, fingers curling in the current. Another swore it was only a branch, but the vision lingered in their minds, gnawing like teeth unseen. Gabriel's voice rose above the storm, harsh and ringing. We came to walk these roads to Richmond. Let no flood turn us back. If the way is swallowed, we wade deeper. If the mud pulls, we drag one another free. But even as he spoke, the crossroads trembled beneath them. The mud seemed to shift, sucking harder, clutching ankles, calves, thighs, as though the earth itself sought to devour them whole. A cry broke out as one man toppled, swallowed to his waist before hands tore him back. His face, pale with terror, glistened in the rain. "It pulls," he gasped. "The earth pulls us down." The circle broke, fear scattering through them like sparks across tinder. Men wrenched at their legs, fighting the mire that clawed upward with each thrash. The youngest screamed, arms flailing, for he sank fastest, the mud lapping at his chest, his face. Lightning flared, and in that flash it seemed the mud was not mud at all but hands. Black and slick, dozens of them, clawing, dragging, pulling the living down to join the drowned. Gabriel seized the boy's arm, yanking him free with a strength born of fury. The boy fell gasping into the circle, eyes wide, mud clinging to him like tar. His scream did not fade but grew shriller, for he swore the hand still clutched at his skin, invisible but unrelenting. The men panted, trembling, eyes darting to Gabriel for command, for salvation. His face was rain-slick, unreadable, carved like iron by the storm. He raised his arm, pointing toward the drowned path that led to Richmond, a river more than a road. "We walk it still," he said. "If heaven rains, let it rain blood when we pass." The storm howled, drowning his words, yet they echoed in every chest. The men moved again, their circle breaking into a line. Their bodies bent to the flood, their feet dragging through water that swallowed their prints before they were made. Behind them, the oak groaned once more, its branches swaying like pendulums, and when lightning burned across the sky, the crossroads revealed itself. A mire pitted with holes deep and round, too neat to be mere chance. Holes shaped like footprints, hundreds of them, leading nowhere. The storm swallowed the vision, but the image burned into their minds, the proof that others had walked this path long before and had not returned. The night was swollen with silence, a silence so taut it seemed it might snap at the brush of a whisper. And then it broke. Two voices, trembling, ragged, spilled into the dark, like blood from a wound. Their words were not shouted nor even spoken with force, but hissed low, confessions meant for ears that had never known chains. They stood outside the overseer's house, shadows hunched and quivering in the lantern glow. Rain still wept from the eaves, dripping in slow, heavy drops, a rhythm that seemed to count the weight of each syllable. The air smelled of wet wood, of mildew, of fear. The first voice cracked like old timber. "They plan it. This very week, Richmond will burn." The second voice followed, thinner, like the hiss of steam. "They gather in shadows. Gabriel leads them. Strike him down and the rest will fall." The overseer leaned forward, pale and eager, a vulture tasting carrion before the corpse was cold. His ink-stained hands scratched furiously across paper, each mark a nail hammered into coffins not yet built. His eyes glittered with the fever of triumph, triumph born of betrayal. Inside the walls, the hearth crackled, but the sound was drowned by the scratch of the quill. Each letter seemed alive, writhing as it formed, serpents coiling on the page. The betrayer's words slithered into white hands, twisted into instruments sharper than any blade. The first man shivered, clutching his own arms as though frost had seeped into his marrow. "I hear them at night. The fire, the chains. I cannot bear it. Better their necks than mine." The second nodded, though his lips trembled. His eyes darted toward the shadows beyond the porch, where the fields stretched endless, black and watching. "If we keep their secret, we hang with them. If we speak, we live." Yet even as he said it, his voice faltered, for the silence beyond seemed to breathe, to listen, to weigh each word as judge and jury. The overseer straightened, quill dripping, grin sharp as a knife's edge. "You have done well. Your names will be remembered." But the words rang hollow, and both men knew it. Remembered, not as saviors, but as traitors. Remembered in whispers, in curses, in the grinding of teeth in the dark. A gust of wind moaned through the shutters. The lantern flickered, and for the briefest instant, the betrayers saw their own reflections in the window pane. Not faces of flesh, but skulls, lips peeled back in eternal screams. They stumbled from the porch, Clutching themselves, their breaths ragged, their feet carrying them down the path slick with rain, the overseer's door closed behind them with a sound like the lid of a coffin. They did not speak to one another. Each step was heavy, louder than the storm, as if the very earth condemned them. The road forked, one path leading back toward the quarters, the other into the woods where the branches dripped like gallows ropes. The younger of the two faltered. His hand caught the other's arm, fingers digging like claws. His whisper was a hiss, nearly drowned by the rain. "Did you hear it?" The older man jerked away. "Hear what?" That voice behind us. It followed into the dark, but the only voice was the storm moaning through the trees, and the steady drip of water from their ragged sleeves. Still, when lightning split the sky, both men turned, and saw the road behind them bare, yet not empty. For in the mud, fresh footprints bled water heavy and deep. Though no man stood to claim them, the betrayers fled. Their steps pounded the soaked earth, but no matter how fast they ran, the sound of pursuit clung close behind. A tread not theirs, heavy, measured, relentless. It did not falter, it did not rush. It simply followed, as sure as judgment. They reached the edge of the fields where the tobacco bent low, heavy with rain. The stalks swayed, though no wind moved them, parting as if to let something unseen pass through. The younger fell to his knees, clawing the mud, his sobs ragged. "It will not stop. We are marked. Brother Gabriel will know. The dead will know." The elder seized him by the shoulders, shaking him, eyes wide, teeth bared like an animal cornered. "Silence! No one must hear!" But the night already had. From the blackness of the field came a low sound, not thunder, not wind, but the grinding of iron. Chains, dragging slow. The sound curled around them, seeping into their bones. The men clutched each other, trembling. Their eyes searched the field, but the darkness gave no form, only sound. Yet in the rhythm of the chains they heard it clearly. "Betrayer! Betrayer!" The younger wailed, covering his ears. But the voice was within him now, echoing in marrow, gnawing at soul. The elder staggered backward, his foot sinking deep in the mud, deeper than the earth should allow. His leg vanished to the knee. He screamed, thrashing, pulling, but the mud clung like a mouth, sucking, swallowing. The younger lunged to save him, hands clasping his arm. For a moment he pulled, straining. Their cries lost to the storm. Then came another flash of lightning, and both saw what held him. Hands, dozens of them. Black dripping, rising from the earth. Fingers wrapped his leg, his waist, pulling him down. The younger let go. His scream tore the night as he fled into the fields, vanishing among the tobacco stalks. The elder's cries gurgled, choked, then ceased, swallowed by the mud. Only rain remained, drumming its hollow dirge. And when the lightning came again, the crossroads stood empty, save for a tongue, pale and wet, lying upon the mud where he had stood, twitching as though still eager to confess. Night in Richmond did not rest. It lurked. The streets lay still, their cobblestones slick with rain, but the silence was not peace. It was the silence of a throat before the scream, of lungs drawn tight before the breaking of a hymn. In the courthouse yard, lanterns guttered low, their flames swallowed by mist. Within that pale glow, rough hands worked with measured patience, weaving hemp into loops. Ropes creaked as they twisted, thick and coarse, each strand drawn taut until it rasped like teeth ground to dust. The sound carried in the air, faint, steady, a rhythm that might have been mistaken for the rocking of a cradle if not for the smell. The smell was sharp, dry, acrid. Hemp soaked in oil and sweat. Rope not meant for tethering beasts nor binding carts. Rope meant for necks. The men who wove them did not speak. Their faces were hollow in the lantern light, shadows falling deep into their sockets, mouths set like stones. Each man's hands moved with a strange precision, as though guided not by thought but by memory, a craft older than their fathers, passed down not in love, but in cruelty. Above, the gallows waited. Its beams loomed in the dark, black against the night sky, slick with rain, slick with shadow. The structure groaned as the wind passed, timbers settling like old bones. From its crossbar hung hooks, swaying faintly, each awaiting its burden. And all the while the city slept, or seemed to. Behind shuttered windows, eyes peered through cracks, candles guttered low, prayers mumbled into trembling hands. The storm had broken but left its echo, a heaviness that clung to the lungs, a dread that made sleep shallow and brittle. Every dream was filled with fire and chains, with footsteps pounding toward Richmond. with faces glimpsed at the edge of the dark, and now the answer. The overseers. The watchmen, the militia captains. They moved like carrion birds, cloaks pulled tight, boots heavy on the wet stone. They passed one another in silence, yet in their eyes was a feverish gleam. Fear had taken root in them, and fear always demanded sacrifice. One, a man with a scar splitting his jaw, whispered as he passed beneath the gallows beam, "Best they hang before the storm breaks again." Another spat into the mud, voice sharp as flint. "Better 100 ropes than one fire in the streets." Their whispers clung to the wood, winding into the hemp itself, as though the nooses drank their words, fattened upon them. The loops gleamed faint in the lantern light, slick, wet, eager. By dawn, the yard was heavy with them, ropes swaying gently in the cold breath of morning, dozens of pale circles waiting to be filled. Each loop cast a shadow upon the mud, and those shadows stretched longer than any rope should allow, writhing like serpents across the ground. The first cart creaked into the yard, its wheels shrieked against the stone, its boards black with rain, its iron fittings groaning like a dirge, and within it, not bodies not yet, but planks, nails, tools. More wood for more gallows. The men unloading it worked quickly, their silence broken only by the hiss of saw against timber, the crack of hammer upon nail. The gallows grew beam upon beam, spreading like a disease. What was one scaffold at dusk became 3 by dawn, each arm stretched wider, reaching toward the sky as though to drag heaven itself down by the throat. A woman, passing with a basket at her hip, paused at the edge of the square, her breath misted in the cold as she stared at the growing forest of wood and rope. Her lips moved, soundless at first, then whispering sharp, "God forgive them." But even she knew he would not. The sun broke weakly through the mist, a pale coin pressed against a sky the color of ash. Its light fell upon the gallows, and the ropes glistened as if slick with dew. Yet when one man reached up to test a knot, his fingers came away not wet with water, but with something darker, sticky, red. He swore, rubbing his hands against his trousers. But the stain clung. The others saw, but none spoke, for in that moment they all knew. The gallows were already fed. The ropes had already drunk. By mid-morning the city stirred. The yard filled with boots, muskets, commands barked sharp. Men were dragged in chains, their faces hollow but unbroken, their steps slow, deliberate, as though each footfall carved a wound into the earth. Gabriel among them, his eyes cast not upward, not downward, but steady, burning with the same fire that had once lit his forge. The crowd gathered, pale faces, eager eyes. Some jeered, some prayed, some only watched, their silence a wound deeper than any shout. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, peering wide-eyed at the ropes that swayed like fruit waiting to be plucked. And then the bell. Its toll cracked the air, low and heavy, echoing through the streets like the beating of a massive heart. Each strike rolled into the marrow of those gathered, shaking them, binding them to what must come. One by one, the prisoners were led forward. The ropes were lowered, nooses slipping over heads, rough against skin. The loops tightened. The beams creaked. The air thickened, and in that moment, as the executioner stepped back, a wind rose sudden and sharp. The ropes swayed violently, though no man had yet dropped, and within their sway, for the briefest instant, shapes appeared. Not men, not bodies, but shadows, dozens of them, twisting and writhing, mouths open in silent screams. The crowd gasped. Children cried. The executioner froze, and Gabriel only smiled, faint and terrible, as though he saw in the shadows not doom but a promise. The bell tolled again. The beams groaned. The ropes swayed wider. And in the distance, from the direction of the river, came a sound, faint, heavy, unmistakable, the dragging of chains growing nearer. The sky split without fire. No flame, no blaze, only white veins of lightning crawling through black clouds, searing the heavens and leaving nothing but after-images burned into the eye. Thunder rolled heavy behind it, deep as a war drum, echoing through the alleys, the hills, the marrow of every man who heard. Richmond cowered beneath it. The streets lay slick with rain, cobblestones glistening like scales of some vast beast. Water streamed through gutters, dragging refuse, bones of rats, splinters of broken barrels. The storm gave no flame, no cleansing fire, only sound and weight. A crown of thunder pressed down upon the city like a hand upon a trembling skull. The militia kept their posts. Muskets gleamed damp in the lightning's flash. Their eyes darted at every shadow, every alley, every figure moving too slow or too fast. The storm made them restless, and restlessness made them cruel. Behind shuttered windows, the enslaved huddled in silence. Mothers pressed children to their breasts, rocking not in comfort but in rhythm with the thunder's toll. Old men whispered broken prayers, their words drowned by the rain on the rooftops. Every ear heard the storm as something more than weather, a warning, a lament, a voice that could not be silenced. Gabriel sat in chains. The jail stank of wet straw and rust. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, striking the stone floor like a clock marking down the last seconds of a life. His hands rested on his knees, shackled, but his back was straight, his gaze fixed upon the single barred window where lightning burned without flame. The men around him stirred, restless, their breaths harsh in the dark. One whispered, voice quivering, "Brother, is this the sign? Does heaven strike with us?" Gabriel's answer came low, steady, iron. "No, it strikes against fear." But outside, the thunder grew heavier, more insistent, until it seemed the city itself beat like a drum, calling for a revolt that had never come, for footsteps that had drowned in flood and betrayal. In the governor's house, candles guttered against the storm. White faces leaned close over tables, maps spread, ink bleeding in the damp air. Their voices hissed, tight with fear. They meant to burn it all. They meant to slaughter in the streets. They meant to take Richmond. Each accusation spat into the storm, but the thunder only swallowed it, answering back with its relentless toll. One of them, pale with drink, muttered as lightning lit his face, "The sky itself rebels. Do you not hear it?" But his words went unheeded. They drowned in the scratch of quills, the clink of glasses, the nervous shuffle of boots outside. Orders were written, sealed, dispatched, though all knew the orders trailed the storm, always behind, never before. The gallows loomed in the courthouse yard, its ropes swaying though the wind was still. Rain slicked its beams, and each bolt of lightning seemed to crown it anew, white fire wrapping its timbers like the bones of a saint turned relic. The nooses dangled, their loops dark, their shadows long, reaching across the mud as if already seeking throats. A boy, too young for war but pressed into watching, stood guard at the edge of the yard. He shivered, clutching his musket, his eyes darting upward each time thunder cracked. He swore, though none believed him, that between the lightning's flash and the thunder's roar he heard voices. Not one voice, but many. Footsteps. Chants. The murmur of hundreds moving as one. Yet when the light came again, the streets lay empty, the mud untouched, the storm mocking his fear. In the prison, Gabriel lifted his head. His lips curved faintly, not in joy, not in sorrow, but in recognition. His voice, low and heavy, broke the silence. They marched still. The men stirred, staring wide-eyed. One whispered, "But who, brother?" "We are shackled. We are silenced." Gabriel's gaze did not waver from the storm beyond the bars. The dead do not silence. Another crash of thunder. Louder, nearer, shattering crockery, rattling the beams of houses, shaking dust from rafters. The sound rolled down streets and alleys, striking walls, doors, and hearts alike. It was a drumbeat too steady to be chance, too deliberate to be storm. And then, silence. The lightning ceased. The rain fell softer. The thunder rolled away into the hills, leaving Richmond smothered in stillness. The gallows ropes hung motionless. The guards exhaled, relief heavy but brief. For in that stillness came a new sound. Chains, dragging, slow, deliberate, endless. They clattered not from the prison cells, not from the militia's belts, but from the streets themselves, ringing against cobblestone, rising from the gutters, echoing through every corner of the city. The boy at the gallows dropped his musket. His scream tore the silence as he pointed to the road beyond, slick, shining, empty, save for the long, wet marks in the mud. Marks that did not match wheels nor hooves. Marks that trailed like the path of chains dragged by hands unseen. The storm had passed, but its crown lingered, invisible, pressing down upon Richmond. And from the prison window, Gabriel's eyes burned brighter than the lightning. The jail was a tomb of iron. Chains rattled like teeth in a skull. Doors groaned like coffins pried half open, and the air carried the stench of mildew and men waiting for death. Yet in the deepest cell where the stone sweated and the straw rotted, Gabriel sat upright as though upon a throne. He did not speak. He had not spoken since the storm. His silence was no absence but a presence, filling the cell until even the guards dared not mock him. They said his stillness was worse than curses, worse than pleas. It was the stillness of iron cooling after fire, a silence that promised only breaking or cutting. His eyes, though shadowed by the bars, burned like a furnace with no smoke. The men imprisoned beside him shifted in the straw, whispering to one another in tongues too soft for the white ears beyond the door. Their voices trembled not only from fear of the gallows but from something heavier. The silence pressed against their teeth, making each word taste like ash. At last one dared to whisper, "Brother Gabriel, will you not speak?" No answer came, but the silence answered all the same. It spread like ink in water, wrapping their hearts until the whisperer bowed his head and shivered. For Gabriel's quiet was not defeat. It was defiance hammered into iron, too heavy for words. The guards muttered about him at night. They drank to wash away their unease, but the silence followed. One spat through the bars, voice thick with ale. "Speak, blacksmith." Curse, cry, beg, "Let your God hear you." Gabriel only lifted his eyes. The guard froze. In the dim torchlight, his gaze shone with a heat that should not have lived in such darkness. The man stumbled back, clutching his chest as though a hammer had struck it, muttering a prayer to saints he had long forgotten. The silence deepened. In the courthouse above, verdicts had already been whispered, sentences written before trials. Rope was measured, beams inspected, the gallows polished by rain. Yet every man involved in Gabriel's fate felt the silence move through the city like smoke. It crept under doors, lingered in pews, coiled in bedsheets. One woman, pale and sleepless, confessed to her husband, "It is as though he waits for something to speak in his place. The storm has not gone." And indeed, though the sky had cleared, Richmond felt unsettled, air heavy as though thunder crouched just beyond sight. The silence was not empty. It was expectation. Back in the jail, the younger prisoners trembled. One prayed, his words spilling in stammers, "Lord, deliver us, Lord, hide us, Lord, hear us." Another muttered, "The fire follows him. Even without a forge he burns." Still Gabriel said nothing. He sat with wrists chained, ankles bound, shoulders square. He breathed slow, deliberate, each inhale like a bellows drawing unseen air into an unseen flame. Then, one night, the silence broke, not by his lips, but by sound, the hammer. It rang once, faint as though struck upon distant anvil. The prisoners all lifted their heads. Another strike followed, louder, closer, reverberating through the stone floor beneath them. Clang, clang, clang. Gabriel did not move. His eyes closed, his breathing steady. The guards rushed to the corridor, torches flaring. What noise is this? Who strikes iron in the night? Yet when they opened the doors, there was nothing but dripping water and rust. The sound had come from nowhere, from everywhere, from within the stone itself. The youngest prisoner whimpered, clutching his knees. The forge calls. It calls him still. Silence fell again, heavier, darker. Even the rats had gone. At dawn, when the keys rattled and the boots of soldiers echoed down the corridor, Gabriel stood. Chains clinked, iron biting his wrists, but he stood as though unbound. The guard who unlocked his cell hesitated, the key trembling in his hand. For Gabriel's silence poured from the threshold like heat, warping the air, burning away courage. "Move," the captain barked. Yet none could bring themselves to lay hand upon him. Gabriel walked out on his own, steps measured, echoing like the toll of a blacksmith's hammer. Through the prison yard he passed, eyes of militia and townsfolk alike following. Some spat curses, some muttered prayers, but none raised voice above a murmur, for his silence swallowed sound, leaving their words limp and hollow. Children peered from doorways, wide-eyed. Old women clutched charms and crosses. And still he did not speak. Only the crow upon the courthouse roof gave voice, cawing harshly, raggedly as though mocking the silence with its own. Its feathers gleamed slick with the morning sun, its eyes glinting red as embers. Gabriel did not look up. His gaze remained forward, furnace-bright. And when at last he reached the courthouse steps where judgment waited, the people swore they felt the ground tremble beneath them. Not from wagons, not from thunder, but from the slow, relentless hammering of an anvil deep in the earth. The silence thickened, unbearable, pressing upon their ears until they thought their skulls would crack. Men clutched their heads, women wept, and still Gabriel stood wordless. At that moment, clouds gathered again, dimming the sun, and the crow screamed louder. And upon the gallows beam nearby, though no hand had touched it, a single noose tightened. The scaffold loomed like a gallows tree sprouted overnight, its beams blackened by rain, its ropes swaying like fruit ripened only for death. Dawn's light revealed it in cruel clarity. No shadows could soften its shape. The people gathered in silence, some with faces pale as chalk, others with eyes burning in quiet prayer. All knew what this day would bear. 25 lives knotted and severed, names erased yet spoken in whispers for centuries to come. The militia formed a ring about the platform, their muskets gleaming, their boots sinking into mud that still remembered the storm. Yet even their presence felt brittle, their eyes darting not only to the condemned but to the sky. As though fearing the storm's return, one by one, the martyrs emerged. They walked barefoot, chains clinking faintly, each step across the courtyard pressing splinters into skin, leaving dark stains of blood upon the wood. The youngest was scarcely grown, face still carrying boyhood's softness. The eldest bore hair white as bone, shoulders bent by years of toil. Yet all walked the same path, heads unbowed, silence held like a weapon sharper than any blade. The crowd murmured. A woman stifled a sob. A child clutched her skirts, whispering, "Why do they climb?" The woman hushed him, but her voice cracked. "Because they must." At the foot of the scaffold, the executioner stood waiting, faceless beneath his hood. He touched the ropes as though testing instruments, pulling, twisting, ensuring each knot would hold. His hands were steady, but his shoulders trembled, for each loop seemed to tighten of its own accord, coiling as if eager for flesh. The first man mounted the steps. His chains rattled, but his face shone with something beyond fear. At the top he paused, turned his gaze upon the crowd, and though his lips did not part, a weight pressed into every heart. It was the silence of a sermon, unspoken yet heard by all. A soldier muttered beneath his breath, "Why do they not beg?" Another answered, uneasy, "Because their silence is louder." And so it was. The second ascended, then the third, each step measured, deliberate, as if reenacting a ritual older than gallows, older than rope. The wood creaked beneath them, groaning like a ship about to sink. By the time the 10th had climbed, the air had grown heavy, thick as smoke, though no fire burned. Birds had ceased their cries. The wind itself held its breath. Then Gabriel appeared. Chains clasped his wrists, but they did not bind his stride. His eyes burned, steady, furnace bright, and his silence cut sharper than thunder. The crowd shifted as he passed. Some lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Others clutched at crosses, muttering prayers not for him but for themselves. At the scaffold's base, he paused. Lightning did not split the sky, yet the air shimmered, as if unseen fire flickered around him. The rope above swayed, though no wind stirred. And with no word he climbed. Each step landed like a tolling bell, resonant, final, echoing into marrow. The 25 stood together now, lined upon the platform. The ropes dangled above, swaying like serpents. The executioner moved among them, placing loops, tightening knots. His hands shook more with each pass, for the silence deepened with every throat he encircled. The crowd dared not cheer, dared not shout. Even the governor's men, cloaked and stern, shifted uneasily, their orders sour upon their tongues. For the air pressed upon them all, a silence thicker than any smoke, as though the martyrs' breaths had already been stolen and now clung to every living lung. One of the condemned, an old man with scars across his back, raised his eyes heavenward. His lips moved, but no sound came, and yet every heart heard it. A prayer not spoken, a curse not uttered, an oath not broken. The silence translated all. The executioner pulled the final lever. Wood groaned. Ropes snapped taut, and in that instant, the silence screamed. It filled the square, poured into ears, into skulls, into marrow, so that every man, woman, and child fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The air rang without sound, the silence tolling like bells struck in hell. The bodies swung, feet twitched, then stilled. Yet their eyes, open, unblinking, did not dim. They stared beyond into something no living soul could see. The governor staggered back. The captain of militia dropped his musket. Even the executioner tore away his hood and fled. For the silence lingered, heavy, unbroken, as if 25 throats still waited to speak. And then, a crow landed upon the gallows beam, its feathers dripping red though no rain had fallen. It opened its beak, but no cry emerged. Only silence poured forth, deeper, darker, endless. The people fled, but the silence followed. It would cling to Richmond, to the land, to the blood-soaked wood of the scaffold. And as dusk fell, those who passed the square swore they saw the ropes swaying, though no wind stirred. And beneath them, shadows still hung, dangling, unbroken. The James did not sleep. It moved like a serpent in the dark, scales of moonlight rippling across its back, its breath the endless hiss of current against stone. Beneath its surface lay silt heavy with ash, bones swallowed whole, chains rusting into its mud. The city might forget, the gallows might creak into silence, but the river kept its ledger. Bodies had vanished, some into shallow graves, others into the current itself, cast away like broken tools. Yet the water remembered. It carried fragments, a tooth snagged in the reeds, a finger bone lodged between rocks, strands of hair winding like weeds through the tide. The James bore these offerings not as waste but as relics, feeding them to its depths until the current itself began to whisper. On still nights, fishermen swore they heard voices in the ripple. Not words, not prayers, but murmurs rising like bubbles from the deep. Nets tore on unseen snags. Oars grew heavy as if hands unseen clung beneath. One man, trembling with fear, whispered to his mate, "The river drags. It will not release what it holds." Rain swelled it, thunder fed it, and the storm that had broken the rebellion had also baptized the river. Where the crossroads flooded, its waters had carried the drowned whispers here, binding them into the current. Each drop now bore memory, hunger, grief. At the riverbank, the scaffold's shadow stretched. Though the bodies had been removed, the water below reflected them still. Shapes swaying just beneath the surface, distorted by ripples but too clear to be mistake. Passers-by turned away quickly, muttering, "The river sees. The river knows." Children were warned never to play near its edge. "Step too close," mothers hissed, "and the water will pull you in to join the unburied." Yet even from a distance, the young claimed they saw eyes, pale, glowing faintly, watching from below. One evening, a soldier who had stood guard at the executions came to the river, drunk and unsteady. He spat into the current, muttering, "No ghost frightens me. Rope is rope. Death is death." But when he leaned close, his face pale in the water's reflection, another face appeared beside his. Not his comrade, not his own, but a dark gaze burning furnace bright, silent, unblinking. The soldier stumbled back, but his heel caught the wet stones. He fell, arms flailing, a scream tearing the air, and then silence. The current closed, the surface smooth, swallowing the sound, swallowing the man. Only his musket washed ashore the next morning, slick with river weeds. Rumor spread. Whispers grew. "The James is cursed. It drinks the guilty." Yet not only the guilty vanished. A washerwoman waiting at the shallows cried out as something seized her ankle. Her companions saw her pulled beneath, her hands clawing at the surface, then gone. When they searched, the only trace was a tangle of chains dredged from the mud, still slick with her blood. The governor dismissed it all. "Superstition," he barked. "The dead are dead." Yet he too avoided the riverbank, his windows shuttered against its ceaseless murmur. For even he could not sleep without hearing water lapping against stone like chains dragging across a floor. At midnight, when the moon stood high, the river grew restless. Its tide churned though no wind stirred. White foam curled like fingers reaching upward, and in its hiss came voices, faint, layered, endless, unfinished, unbroken. "We rise." The current struck the pilings of the bridge with a hollow boom, echoing like a drumbeat. On the far bank, dogs howled, their voices ragged with fear. Fishermen cast no nets. Lovers fled from the banks. Only the crow remained, perched upon the skeletal branch of a half-drowned tree. It watched the current with red glinting eyes, its wings twitching as though restless to join, and then the river gave up its first gift. At dawn, the townsfolk found it. A rope, swollen with water, knotted into a noose. It had tangled in reeds, swaying gently in the tide. Beside it lay a plank of wood, pale and smooth, carved by no human hand. Etched upon it in grooves dark with silt were words none had carved. We are not gone. The plank was burned in secret, but the ashes floated downstream, returning to the water. That night the whispers grew louder, their cadence like the chant of unseen marchers, their rhythm like hammers striking iron. The James carried them onward, past banks and reeds, past forests and fields, feeding the whispers into every tributary, every stream, until the land itself seemed to hum with the weight of unfinished vengeance, and those who dared to stand upon the bridge swore they saw them. 25 shadows wading through the current, chains trailing, their eyes glowing beneath the surface, waiting, watching, rising. The river did not sleep, for the river remembered, and upon its black waters floated a single crow's feather, gleaming wet as ink, drifting slowly toward the scaffold's reflection. The gallows did not fall. Years passed, storms raged, summers burned, winters gnawed. Yet the scaffold stood, its beams warped, its rope frayed, but unbroken. Each creak of its timbers carried not the sigh of wood, but the groan of memory, as though the very structure inhaled and exhaled with the weight of 25 souls. Children avoided its shadow, yet dared one another to linger beneath. They swore that when the wind stirred, the rope swayed not with air but with breath. The city told itself the rebellion had been crushed. Names were erased from record, prayers left unsaid, graves unmarked. Yet the earth refused to forget. Rain sank deep into the soil, carrying blood into roots and rivers. Crops grew bitter where the bodies had been buried. Cattle shied from fields that whispered with each dusk. Even tobacco leaves curled strangely, as though choking on smoke not yet risen. By night, Richmond streets whispered with unrest. Not in shouts, not in songs, but in small sounds. The scrape of chains across stone when no man walked. The echo of marching feet in alleys left empty. The low hum of a forge hammering iron, though no fire burned. The rebellion breathed. In the shacks by the river, elders told the young, they silence the men, but not the fire. Chains break in silence before they break in sound. Listen, child. The earth still speaks with their steps, and the children did listen. At night they pressed ears to the floorboards and heard faint thuds, a rhythm too steady for rats, too distant for men. The sound of marching muffled by soil, steady as a heartbeat. The governor slept uneasy. He kept the windows barred, candles lit through all hours, muskets within reach. Yet even he could not close his ears to the gallows creak. At times he swore he heard words in the wood. Not English, not prayer, but oaths spoken in iron and blood. One night he whispered to his wife, voice trembling, "It is over. It must be over." Her reply was a whisper sharp as frost. Then why does the rope still sway? The rebellion breathed not in noise, but in silence thick as smoke. It filled every church pew where enslaved hands folded, every field where backs bent beneath the sun, every night where dreams carried fire and hammer and storm. It lived in glances exchanged, in words unsaid, in chains rattling faintly with no master near. Even the river remembered. Its current swelled with whispers, carrying voices downstream, feeding them into soil, into roots, into marrow. Fishermen claimed their nets dragged heavy not with fish but with shadows, shapes writhing in silence until torn free. And always, the crow remained. It perched upon the gallows beam. Through storm and sun, feather black as char, eyes glowing with ember light, it watched the rope sway, tilting its head as though listening. Sometimes it cawed, a sound sharp enough to split silence, and the people swore they heard not bird but man, not cry but command. The rebellion breathed in that crow's throat. On certain nights, when the moon sank blood red, the gallows did more than creak. Its beam shuddered as though bearing weight. Its rope strained as though tightened around unseen necks. Passers-by fled, but not before glimpsing shadows swaying against the night sky. 25 figures, necks bent, feet dangling above the mud, eyes glowing faintly like coals that refused to die. And beneath their swaying, the earth shifted. The soil cracked as if stirred from within, roots trembling, worms fleeing, stones splitting. Some swore they saw a hand, pale, skeletal, iron-scarred, press briefly through the mud before sinking again. The gallows exhaled. The crow screamed, and the city held its breath. The rebellion was crushed in name, in body and blood, but not in breath. It lingered, gnawed, swelled, waiting. And those who dared to walk past the scaffold at midnight claimed the rope itself whispered, fibers rasping together in words no man had taught it. Chains never rust forever.